right, good morning, everybody. I've got 9 o'clock, and for the sake of the live stream, we have to go ahead and get started. Maybe, if we get the feedback. All right, cool. I will go ahead and open us up in prayer, and then we can get right to it. Perhaps, for the people in the back there, Mr. Andy Porter, paging Mr. Andy Porter. All right, I'll go ahead and pray and we'll get started. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for giving us another opportunity to worship you together as a body, and give us an opportunity to glorify you with our actions and with our minds. I pray that you would be honored and your people would be helped by what we're learning today, would be able to give them some confidence when they are going to fulfill the Great Commission in sharing your truth and sharing the gospel with those they know. I pray for the service today as well, that we would be able to hear clearly what you want us to hear and be able to apply it and be able to glorify you as we head into the new week. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so last week, oh, by the way, there's outlines back there on the little table when you first walked in if you don't have one. And also for those online, Nathan sent out an email saying that it's on CCB, so if you've got it, you can download it and go along with us. And last week we talked about identifying the idol. We talked about using the first step in the Columbo tactic to just get us used to asking questions. And I can't overstate the importance of that, just learning to be comfortable asking questions. Why do you believe that? How did you come to that conclusion? What do you mean when you say X, Y, and Z? And we'll continue to reference that as we go along. And step 2 in the process is identifying the idol's reductionism. And I'm going to make a brief point about the book, which again is Nancy Pearcey's Finding Truth. First of all, there's a study guide in the back of it, so it's not as big as you think. But if you're reading along, you might have noticed this chapter is pretty heavy. It's a long chapter, and you might be going through, oh man, she's talking about all these philosophers, Hegel and Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. What is the point of all this? And what she's doing is she's tracing, this is basically to show you that there's nothing new under the sun. All of these ideas that you see around us today have come from previous ideas in the past. Usually they trickle down out of philosophy because that's just the discipline of ideas. So she's kind of tracing, okay, here's an aspect over here, and it came from this, and it came to here, and she's just giving you a historical trace, basically. And it's helpful, but you might have to go back and read it a couple times, maybe Google a few terms in there. I promise it's worth it, but it is a lot. I hear you on that. So step 2 is identifying the idol's reductionism, and I gave at the top of the handout there the dictionary definition of reductionism. It says the practice of analyzing and describing a complex phenomenon in terms of phenomena that are held to represent a simpler or more fundamental level, especially when this is said to provide a sufficient explanation. Now you're going, okay, that's not helpful. So my kind of version of that is like when you replace God with an idol, everything is thrown out of whack, and things end up getting sinfully reduced or distorted to what they are not supposed to be, humans in particular. And so that's kind of what we're going to look at today. And we're going to deal primarily with materialism and postmodernism, because those are the two streams that you end up encountering the most, whether if you are or have kids or friends or whatever that are going into college, you're going to encounter that a lot. Pearcey talks about going into the science building and encountering one ideology, and then going into the fine arts building and encountering another ideology. But first we're going to look at Romans 1, which is where she's taking these 5 steps. And I kind of broke it down to just point out a few things. At the top, it says God gave them up, gave them up, gave them up. You hear that repetition, and as Christians, you know that's a terrifying thing, for God to give you up to your idols. But first there I've got, under the heading of cause, 22 and 23 from Romans 1, it says, claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged, key word, the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. And if that was the cause, here's the effect. Therefore God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. And then you have this list of horrible side effects. You've got dishonorable passions, exchange natural relations, contrary to nature, consumed with passion, committing shameless acts, receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error, a debased mind, who do what ought not to be done. They are filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. And the end of all that is, though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. And that's, again, as Christians, we realize, okay, there are things about God that are known, that are clearly perceived, right, in nature and written on our hearts, and because they do know them, they suppress them, and with all of these disastrous side effects. And then I've linked together a few quotes from Piercy's book to kind of give some groundwork for where we're going. So why do idols invariably lead to destructive behavior? What's the connection? The link is that idols always lead to a lower view of human life. When a worldview exchanges the Creator for something in creation, it will also exchange a high view of humans made in God's image for a lower view of humans made in the image of something in creation. When God gives people up to their idols, the result is always a reductionistic view of humanity, which ultimately unleashes harmful and destructive behavior. When we reduce people to anything less than fully human, we will treat them as less than fully human. When we define God as a something instead of a someone, we will tend to treat humans as some things too. When we dehumanize people in our thinking, we will eventually mistreat, oppress, abuse, and exploit them in our actions. And I think if you're paying attention at all to anything going on around us, you can say, yeah, that is absolutely what happens. Also, I didn't put this in there, but there's a passage in Psalms that talks about those who are worshiping idols eventually become like them. And that, I think, is perfectly manifest as well. If you're becoming like an idol and you're viewing things through the lens of that idol, eventually you become hard. You have a distorted view of yourself, others, creation, and everything else that follows. And one particular concept that might be helpful is the idea of the worldview box. So if you're rejecting God, the God who we know from the scriptures exists, and you're rejecting his description of his own universe and his description of us, if you're rejecting that, you then have to put in its place some sort of a grid filter. Basically, you create a box that you're trying to stuff all of creation into. And because it's not the right one, you're not following the scriptures, you're not agreeing with God, as it were, you're going to have something sticking out of it. So imagine kind of a cartoony type box, and maybe a person will say, I'm trying to be fit inside of this tiny box, and you can fit most of me, but there's like an arm dangling out or like a leg or something. That's kind of what you're looking for when thinking about worldviews, because there's going to be something sticking out. Every non-Christian, non-biblical worldview, whether it's a religion, a philosophy, whatever, can't account for everything, and that's as an apologist or as a detective, that's part of your goal, is trying to look and see what's sticking out of the box. And then you point that out to the person you're talking with or the book you're like, oh, that's sticking out of the box. And because their worldview cannot account for that, they have to try and explain it away. Like it's not there. Like, oh, no, that's just part of the box. Well, no, that's an arm hanging out. No. That's an illusion. It's a mental construct you have, or perhaps it's a social construct. That's a popular term these days. It's a social construct. It's not a thing. Don't worry about it. And so doing this produces a fragmented two-story worldview. This idea comes straight from Francis Schaeffer. He does it a lot. Piercy in her other books does it a lot. And basically, if you want to go watch, it's on YouTube. It's called How Should We Then Live? A video series that Francis Schaeffer made years ago. You'll get to see the man himself in all of his strange-looking glory with his knickers and his long goatee and long hair. Just very bizarre-looking dude. But he goes through, and he kind of does what Piercy is doing in the book about tracing how ideas come down from philosophy. But he goes through and he's drawing lines in the sand. He's like, it used to be that there would be some guy that came along and would draw a circle and say, this is how you explain everything. And then the next guy would come along and say, no, he'd cross that out. It's like, that's not right. This, and draw his own circle. This is how you would explain everything. And it kept going and until they crossed what Schaeffer called the line of despair. But basically, people gave up in the idea of ever trying to find a circle that fits everything. Because, of course, you can't, the Bible's off the table already, right? You can't do that, and because that's not the case, we have to figure this out, and they would just get frustrated. And so eventually they thought, no, it can't be done. There is no such thing as one complete circle. What you have to do is you have to have a line. You have to have a division, and that's how you're going to explain everything. So we talked about a little bit last week about some of the isms that you might encounter, and we mentioned that it's not as important to know exactly the name of the ism, especially because the person you're talking to might not also know the ism, but to be able to look and figure out what it is that gives everything they do meaning, what's the idol they have, asking questions, getting to know the person. And so I've got two on the outline. I've got two particular, two story outlines, if you want to call them dualisms or divisions or whatever. And the first one is materialism, right? So if you're in college, you go to the science building, this is the view you're going to see. They try to live on the bottom story only. They would say the material world is all that there is, all that there could possibly be, and everything else that's not material, they kind of throw up into this upper story. And what they might call that upper story, illusions, necessary fictions maybe, or social constructs. Some of the meaner guys might say they're crutches for weak people. But the whole point is that you have, if you look at what's in the bottom, you have math, science, objectivity, facts, perhaps the body. And in the upper story, the non-material world, you have basically everything that gives life meaning. You've got mind, love, emotions, religion, God, morals, values. And because the only thing you can know for certain is in the lower story, you have to reduce anything else in the upper story. You have to explain it away. And you may have heard, this is not as popular now, but you may have heard this years ago, but it's still around, the fact-value split, or the fact-value divide. Like, okay, well, especially when it comes to ethics, morality, like, look, here are the facts. Yeah, you might believe that. You could have that as a value, perhaps, but that's separate from the facts, right? So to take an advantage, or take an example that's very current, if you talk about abortion, right? It used to be that the debate was over whether or not it was life. When did life actually begin? And the pro-choice movement has kind of ceded that ground. And be like, well, yeah, okay, fine. It's life. It's even human life, because what other kind of life could it be, right? But what's the line you hear? Yeah, it's human, but it's not a person, right? That's the two-story thing. On the bottom story, you've got this is a human, but it's not a person, upper story, so therefore it's okay to go ahead and get rid of that life. Well, and if you ask, well, what's a person? So the handy thing about that is, because it's not in the lower story, the realm of facts, it can be whatever you want. You can talk to several different people and get several different examples. To be considered a person, you have to check any number of boxes, and then it would be worthy of life. You can see the dominoes in that way of thinking, right? Because why would being inside the womb be a criterion? Doesn't have to be. It just inches toward all those other beliefs because it's a split thing. You don't have to worry about it. Take another example, the trans movement, right? You have people that say, I feel like a woman or a man, and however they choose to define it, and what my biology tells me, what I was assigned at birth, has no relevance, right? Upper, lower story again. Your body is just this sort of complex meat machine that has no real relevance to the you in the upper story. And therefore, like any machine, you can just swap out parts and make it how you see fit. Make it in your image. And but what happens with your machines when they start to break down? Throw them away. This isn't hard to see, but it is tragic to see. And in fact, I've got another quote from our favorite atheist down there, Richard Dawkins, who firmly believes in this type of view. Said the total amount of suffering per year in the natural world is beyond all decent contemplation. During the minute that it takes me to compose this sentence, thousands of animals are being eaten alive. Many others are running for their lives, whimpering with fear. Others are slowly being devoured from within by rasping parasites. Thousands of all kinds are dying of starvation, thirst, and disease. It must be so. If there ever is a time of plenty, this very fact will automatically lead to an increase in the population until the natural state of starvation and misery is restored. In a universe of electrons and selfish genes, which selfish genes is his kind of idea of evolution, blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky. And you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. It's tragic and sad, but if God doesn't exist, he's not wrong, he's right. And all this societal energy we have right now for social justice and everything else, you take God out of the picture, doesn't matter. You're not going to get it. You shouldn't try to get it. All you've got is blind, pitiless indifference, right? The quote from, I believe, Darwin, nature is red in tooth and claw. And if all we are is nature, stuff happens, deal with it. Right? This is that kind of materialistic view. I put a couple of isms in there. Atheism is committed to materialism, and empiricism is a form of materialism. And so though you can easily see what's getting reduced, right? The human body and the human person as a whole is being reduced to just kind of a complex machine that doesn't have meaning. There isn't meaning in the universe. There isn't meaning for it to find. Perhaps if you can try and force your own illusory meaning on things, you'll be ignorant, but maybe ignorance is bliss. And so as an apologist, as a Christian, you're hearing that and you're going, why do you believe that? Because I guarantee you they don't live that way, right? Dawkins has a family. And in fact, in one of his other books, he talks about how we're all just dancing to our DNA, just kind of biochemically predetermined to do what we do, right? Love and emotions are just synapses firing in your brain. And but it's our duty, he says, to rise above our DNA. To which I say, why? How? If what you're saying is true, then it's impossible to rise above it. And if we can, it's just an illusion. Why are we all participating in this illusion anyway? In fact, there was an existentialist philosopher that said the hardest question in all of philosophy is why you shouldn't commit suicide. And that's a really hard question if God doesn't exist, because everything else is just kind of pointless. Right? So you're here to ask these people, why do you believe that? Do you really think when you look at your kid that, take it or leave it? I'm not talking teenager, I'm talking baby. So, yeah, and the other, so there's you're in the science building, right? That's where you're camping out for materialism, and then you cross I'm envisioning my own campus. You cross the lawn, and you enter the fine arts building, social science building. Now, some of the social sciences have kind of gone along with materialism, but others of them have embraced postmodernism, which that one is a lot more popular of a term today. And they have this, it's weird, postmodernism kind of tried to solve the materialism problem, because they said, wow, that's depressing. We don't want to look at everything as if it was determined by biology and chemistry, and therefore there's no freedom, that's really depressing, so we're going to create something that's better, that's different. And it's kind of the same thing, just the other side of the coin. You still have the non-material world and the material world, but instead of camping out in the lower story, they camp out in the upper story. Piercy talks about how these two are kind of inheritors of the Enlightenment versus like the romantic type of view. And so postmodernism says, look, yeah, there is kind of a material world out there. Now, some would disagree with that. That you have math, science, objectivity. I put a little tilde in front of that because that's kind of a squishy word, and some people might say it exists, some don't. And you have the body. that doesn't particularly matter all that much, because what matters is how you interpret that. In the upper story, your subjective interpretation of it, your experience, meaning is up there, truth, in quotes, is up there, we'll get into that, and mind is up there. And basically, they looked at that and said, yeah, okay, you might have all this physical stuff out there, but it doesn't mean anything until you're there to interpret it. You're like, okay, that does kind of make sense, right? Obviously, we have minds and we're interpreting things, and they just push it to the extreme. So you can't get, the philosophical term is you cannot get an ought from an is. In other words, you can't look at this chair and all of creation and think, okay, now I can derive morals from it. So they go, well, okay, truth then has to reside in the mind, has to reside with the individual. So truth then becomes relative. Now, of course, as we get to step 3 and 4 of critiquing these worldviews, it's quite easy to point out things like, well, if all truth is relative, how did you get to know the non-relative truth that all truth is relative? But this also has issues, right? Other than just logical issues. You're still reducing, you've still got a leg hanging out of the box, right? You still have the lower story, which doesn't really mean anything. The trans split between the you and your body is still here. In fact, it might even be more here than it is with the materialist philosophy. And you're still devaluing the person, which, as a side plug, Love Thy Body by Nancy Pearcey deals exclusively with, it's the subtitle, Answering Hard Questions About Life and Sexuality. She deals with the whole array of LGBTQ stuff and points out how, despite how much they try and celebrate sex and the body and stuff, it's actually a very dehumanizing and low view, and Christianity has quite a high view of that. Shows kind of how to make a case for Christianity based on that. And so you're left with a bunch of individual people who have their own subjective interpretation of everything. Truth is relative and determined by yourself, your upbringing, whatever, and possibly some lower story stuff that's around there that doesn't have much meaning until you force your meaning upon it. But people realized that that was true so far as it went, but you can't really do anything when you're locked inside your own head that much. And so God doesn't exist, and you don't want to do the materialist route, so now you're locked inside your head. What do? You have to look out toward society, toward cultures for more grounding, more meaning. Right? I had the quote there well, it's not a quote, I just wrote it. It's a quote from me, put it that way. In order to avoid the cold mechanical determinism of materialism, the things in the upper story are what can be relied on. The things in the lower story need to be explained away. The individual becomes subsumed into being a mouthpiece for the communities of which they belong. Their race, class, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, religion, international status, power differential. You can keep going with the categories. But we see how the individual gets swallowed up, and here's kind of an older example, but there's a few examples of it today since we have election season going on. There used to be this weird unicorn of a thing called the pro-life Democrat. And there are some people that have tried to advocate for that. On the campaign trail, there would be people that asked Biden and, back before he was the selection, all the other candidates about it, and they were just kind of like, Nope, can't be done. You can't be part of our group and have a view that doesn't agree 100% with our group. And you see that all the time with, this is the view of blank community, right? To use myself as an example, like, well, if I were to hold a view that was different from the accepted view of all white Scandinavian dissenting males, it would just simply not count. You don't know the authentic experience, so you don't count. It gets swallowed up, your individuality, and we all know God did in fact create us with individuality, but if the body doesn't mean anything, and if God doesn't exist, and it's all about subjective interpretation, then individuals in groups are how we do things. That's how we get to truth and actually accomplish anything. Truth with a quotes around it, or lowercase t, Francis Schaeffer called true truth, objective truth from our subjective relativism. Right, so there's a quote by Nancy Pearcey in there as well. If there is no objective or universal truth, then any claim to have objective truth will be treated as nothing but an attempt by one interpretive community to impose its own limited subjective perspective on anyone else or everyone else. An act of oppression, a power grab. Right? How many people have heard the phrase, you can't force your beliefs, your morality on others. You can't legislate morality as if the government could do anything else, but you can't do that because it's wrong. You have to think, well, why is that? To use your Columbo question, someone says, hey, you're a Christian, you can't force your beliefs on me. To which, if you're a little more snarky, you might say, why are you trying to force your belief on me? Why are you trying to tell me what I can and can't do? Right, but if you're not as snarky, which you probably shouldn't be, and that's a good thing, you might say, why is it wrong for me to try and force my belief on others? And you might get a blank stare, because you've just been taught to throw a slogan, and that's meant to shut down a conversation. Everyone knows, therefore, you shouldn't question it. But as a Christian, you should, because we believe that morality and truth is objective. Ultimately, it comes from God. It's grounded in His nature and character, and it's revealed to us by the Scriptures. Now, in later weeks, depending on if that's an issue or question, something you all want us to get into, we can talk about the reliability of the Scriptures, how you can test that and know that. But you might also, and I just use religion as an example, but the phrase nothing but is a good kind of signpost for something is being reduced. The phrase religion is nothing but an emotional crutch for pain or death. You just believe that because you can't handle the truth. You don't want to believe that when you die, it's done. That's the end of the story. You want to believe in some fairy tale afterlife, therefore it'll make death easier for you. Or religion is nothing but wish fulfillment. You just believe that there's this magical super being that can grant you all your wishes if you pray hard enough or do all the right rituals. That's all it is. Or religion is nothing but projecting the need for a father figure. Right? You all call God your father. Yeah, okay, you've got daddy issues. That's all it is. Religion is nothing but superstition for people who don't know better. We've gotten past that. Yeah, maybe way back in the day of ignorance and pre-science when people saw lightning and got afraid and thought it was the gods and did sacrifices. That's all this is. It's a remnant. You don't understand science. We've gotten past that. You haven't, therefore you have religion. Or religion is nothing but illusion. It kind of has to be. And just to reiterate, if God doesn't exist, they're not wrong, they're right. Paul says if Jesus hasn't been raised, we are most to be pitied, right? And then I kind of added a couple of isms there. She includes them kind of at the tail end of the chapter. Pantheism is the belief that God is everything, basically. And it reduces humanity to a piece of the puzzle. You are part of the Force in Star Wars, basically. And the ultimate goal is annihilating your individuality to become one with the One, capital O. You can see how that is dehumanizing. All of your self is being divested in order for you to, commune with the One. To which your Columbo question might start perking, your attention might start perking up and be like, well, hold on. How do you know? How do you know that God is one? Everything is one and all is part of the divine. How did you know that? How did you get outside of this to get there? Why does that matter? Etc. And then on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have Islam, right? One of the main thrusts of Islam is that Allah is one. They really want to force that, or stress that rather, in contradistinction to Christianity, right? We believe that God is Trinity. That's a big problem with Islam. But one of the issues, one of the reductionisms that comes from Islam is that personhood, personality is stripped from the divine. Love doesn't make any sense if there is one person. Perhaps you love yourself, but you don't have the concept for love without another person. So maybe Allah wanted to love and had the capacity to show love, but there was nothing to show love to, so he created. And in that sense, Allah is dependent on creation, at least to express certain aspects of himself, which is a problem if you have your God dependent on creation. But also, if you have all of those different relational elements and personhood, that this is not, you don't have a relationship with God in that. There is no connection really. This is why Islam needs to submit, and the Quran is that which is to be recited. Right? It's ritual, it's repetition. You don't have any of that community and self-revelation and sharing, and etc. And so you look at different things like, okay, that's sticking out of the box, that's sticking out of the box. Using your Columbo question, why do you believe that? Before we go on, do we have any questions? It's kind of a lot, and the chapter was even bigger, so. No. Okay. So I'm going, well, I guess we'll get some of the books out of the way. We talked about Love Thy Body, and then this is one volume of the collected works of Francis Schaeffer. There's 4 books in here, so they're not super long. And he talks a lot about, in more detail, the split worldview, where these beliefs came from, and he does more of a job of trickling it down into even art or music, poetry. I've tried to do this myself and realized that I can't, but he'll be able to look at a picture and be like, oh, here's a Picasso. Well, the ideas around that time show why he was doing the weird, disjointed thing, and here's what the belief structure was for that, and it came from this, and here's how it came down afterward. It's amazing. Ultimately, I would read anything by Francis Schaeffer, but I've listed his 3 books there: The God Who Is There, Escape from Reason, and He Is There and He Is Not Silent. That's called his trilogy. They have it in a single volume now, but I would definitely suggest that. And then I'm also going to just read a poem real quick. It's called the Modern Thinker's Creed. You may have heard it before. But this will kind of, it was written a while ago, but it's still quite relevant, and even more so in some ways. But it kind of talks about these sorts of reductionisms, these sorts of beliefs. So it's by Steve Turner. It said, "We believe in Marx, Freud, and Darwin. We believe everything is okay as long as you don't hurt anyone to the best of your definition of hurt and to the best of your knowledge. We believe in sex before, during, and after marriage. We believe in the therapy of sin. We believe that adultery is fun. We believe that sodomy is okay. We believe that taboos are taboo. We believe that everything's getting better, despite evidence to the contrary. The evidence must be investigated, and you can prove anything with evidence. We believe there's something in horoscopes, UFOs, and bent spoons. Jesus was a good man, just like Buddha, Muhammad, and ourselves. He was a good moral teacher, though we think his good morals were bad. We believe that all religions are basically the same, at least the one we read was. They all believe in love and goodness. They only differ on matters of creation, sin, heaven, hell, God, and salvation. We believe that after death comes the nothing, because when you ask the dead what happens, they say nothing. If death is not the end, if the dead have lied, then it's compulsory heaven for all, except perhaps Hitler, Stalin, and Genghis Khan. We believe in Masters and Johnson. What's selected is average, what's average is normal, and what's normal is good. We believe in total disarmament. We believe there are direct links between warfare and bloodshed. Americans should beat their guns into tractors, and the Russians would be sure to follow. Gives you a sense of the time which it was written. We believe that man is essentially good. It's only his behavior that lets him down. This is the fault of society. Society is the fault of conditions. Conditions are the fault of society. We believe that each man must find the truth that is right for him. Reality will adapt accordingly. The universe will readjust. History will alter. We believe that there is no absolute truth, accepting the truth that there is no absolute truth. We believe in the rejection of creeds and the flowering of individual thought. If chance be the father of all flesh, disaster is his rainbow in the sky. And when you hear, state of emergency, sniper kills 10, troops on rampage, whites go looting, bomb blast school, it is but the sound of man worshiping his maker. You see both those, the materialism and postmodernism in that, right? And that's, I know a lot of people that actually kind of hold to both without realizing it, because you just sort of have, I'm postmodern when it comes to ethics and religion. That's when it's most convenient, right? You don't want to be a postmodern, you don't want your car manufacturer to be postmodern, right? The only time it's convenient is to be postmodern when it comes to ethics and religion and morals. Then you can just get all loosey-goosey and believe whatever you want, and everything will change, and you get spiritualistic mysticism type stuff that is taken to the extreme, right? Your personal belief actually attracts, your beliefs attract those things to you. You hear people talk about that, attractional thinking and whatever. That's a variant of postmodernism. That's the whole reality will change, reality will alter, history will alter based on your belief. But then when it comes to everything else, well, it's materialism. So you get this disjointed belief system, but it's all there. And so what this week and last week you're kind of setting up targets in a way. So people have their box that they've created, and you've got the stuff hanging out of it. Then you can say, hey, there's a thing that doesn't fit. I'm going to ask questions about that, and hopefully that will lead you to being like, okay, well, here's how that actually is. Your person and your body actually do matter, and they are united, and here's how Christianity then explains that. Or here's how your emotions, here's how you can look at someone. you're made in the image of God, therefore you have dignity and worth. So when I say I love you, that means something. It's not just my own subjective feeling, or if you're a materialist, it's not just biochemical reactions of neurons in my brain, right? That's actually meaningful. And you can start to show them how Christianity makes sense of everything that doesn't have there's nothing sticking out of the box, because the God who created the universe and us showed us the scriptures, what my Bible's over there, the scriptures, what box he created. So hopefully this is a little helpful in getting you to move the ball down the road a little bit. I was talking to someone who had, actually the book I mentioned before, Tactics by Greg Koukl, is where the Columbo thing came from. He was saying, yeah, I'm starting to do that, and I'm asking questions, and I don't have good answers for it. And I said, that's fine. Totally fine. You go away, I mean, this happens anyway, in like any debate or conversation you have, you go away thinking, now I've got the perfect thing, perfect answer for that. This is how I would have asked that. This is how I would have responded differently. That's actually a good thing. Don't let that come back on you and go, well, I messed up, so I'm never going to do this again. I'm just going to hide and not have these conversations. No, let that teach you. Run it through, and so the next time when that objection comes, you will have your better answer prepared. Ultimately, I am done a little bit early, so I will I'll pray unless there's any questions. Go ahead.
It might be helpful to think for a second, like when you've got any questions or the reduction point, religion is nothing but when you get those kind of statements, what would be your first question to those? And since we're going to be dealing with most people who have not thought this through, they've not figured out a tight philosophical system that they themselves fit into. So they're going to be okay kind of with the merging of two systems. They're going to be okay kind of contradicting themselves. So how do you deal with that when you get an answer where you say, okay, well, this is not going to fit, and they say, oh yeah, that's fine. I don't really care about being consistent. How do you pursue that kind of the next step?
Yeah. So the question for the live stream was, people are fine with kind of inconsistencies. They haven't thought through it. They take a little bit from this system and a bit from that system, and it's fine. What do you do? What's the next step? So we focused a little bit on how these reduce us as humans, and I think that's where you want to kind of show. Because if you just say it's an inconsistent system, you'll get some people who are nerds like me and you go, that'll actually mean something. They'll be like, oh, that might be a problem. But for other people that will just say, okay, who cares? And this is okay, well, if you're devaluing the person, right, what does it mean to your materialist person who says the body is just kind of there, and you do that? Well, okay, would you be opposed to physical harm? If so, why? Do you believe in caring for others? Do you believe in being to use a current phrase, the best you could be? Why does that matter? Why is that there? Ask questions relating to whatever part of humanity they're reducing. So that way you can present the higher and better view of humanity and the person that Christianity provides. And again, this is kind of disjointed because we're going step 1 and 2, and then we have to kind of wait 3 and 4 are the critiquing weeks, and then 5 is presenting a positive case for Christianity. So I don't know if that helped at all, but that's where I would go. If your person is more philosophically inclined, you may want to point out that there's inconsistencies. If they're not, what is important to them? Right? Do they have strong moral emotions? Do they really want justice, for example? Okay. If morality is relative, why should we press for justice? Especially, at least on a grand scale. The prison system is a problem. We got a problem with police brutality. Okay, so why should I care about that? And especially with the very hot pan we have on that stuff now, you'll get immediate, what do you mean? Okay, well, I'm just taking what you're giving me and asking why I should care. So it's not the one-size-fits-all approach like we mentioned before, but you're just trying to see what they're giving you and then pushing that a little bit. You've got your questions, you've got your radar tuned to what a reductionism might be, what the person's idol might be, and that tends to tailor how I guide the discussion. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, are we going to get concrete examples of this instead of theoretical examples? So we've been, Nathan week 1 and me the next couple weeks, I've been trying to kind of at least give building blocks and tools, right? So the 2 weeks of critiques and the 1 week of presenting Christianity will focus a lot more on concrete stuff. But they're going to be using the tools that we've been talking about. And also, I don't know if you were here last week or not, but the book Tactics by Greg Koukl is very helpful in conversational apologetics. So basically showing how asking questions can help with that and what questions to ask. So we're going to cover more of that, so hang on. But yes, I will make sure to bring it more practical for sure. Anybody else? Okay. I will close us in prayer and we can be done a couple minutes early. Heavenly Father, I am so not up to the task of showing your glory to believers or unbelievers, and thankfully I am so grateful that you are sovereign and you are in control. Even when we as Christians might talk to someone and feel like we made a mistake, you're still in control of that. You are the one who brings regeneration. You're the one who brings new life. We point to you, but it's you who do the work. The Holy Spirit does the work in their life. I'm so thankful for that. And I pray that we would be emboldened to share your truth, because we do have the truth. You are on our side. And if you're on our side, what do we have to fear? Thank you for giving us the scriptures so that we can know your truth and have a real personal relationship with you, and to share that with a world which doesn't have that as an option. I pray that we would continue to seek diligently your truth and seek a closer relationship with you so that we can be properly grounded when we share our faith with others. I Pray that you would guide us in that as we go into the coming week. In Jesus' name, amen.